Chris, welcome to the Compete Everyday podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to meet you, Jake.
Yeah, you as well. I'm glad we got introduced. I really appreciate the opportunity to dive into your book, Move or Dies. We were briefly touching on off air. I had a chance to read it over the last week, honestly, as we're recording this early July. Got a chance to read it on one of my flights back to Texas and enjoyed it. I laughed. We're pretty kindred spirits because a lot of it reminded me of some of my book as well, and just how we like to tell stories and a lot of the truths that we love to stick in. So very excited for today's conversation. Before we talk about it, we talk about some of your career. I want to go back. I want to know, like, from you, man, going into coaching, especially coaching sport, strength, getting around guys, football, things like that. Where did that first passion go to? Because a lot of people struggle, one, going from a player to wanting to coach, and then sticking with it long term in an impactful way that you did.
Well, Jake, if it's a passion, it's within you. I started coaching Little League baseball when I was 15 years old, and I coached for my whole professional life until I'd done everything I wanted to do. So coaching. And coaching to me, when I started, was to win championships. I told my buddy Nate Lau when I was 10 that I was going to win a Super Bowl. And it took me 40 years to get there, but I eventually did that. And as we sat on the tarmac in New York before the flight home, if you go up to the third row in first class, seat C, there was one guy who was working while everybody else was in modes of celebration. Either they were passed out from the celebration from the win before, the night before, or were still celebrating. And there was one guy that was working on his workout that wasn't going to be needed until April, and they'd worked on it all season. And that was me. And I dotted all the T's and I crossed all the I's. And I sat back and I looked around and I thought, this was... my life goal was to win a Super Bowl. And I just did, and I was working on the next one. And I said, something's wrong with this pitcher. And I went back, and it took me a couple years to finally figure it out. But I'm not in coaching. Coaching was a vehicle for me. Coaching was not for winning the championships. It was to help people along their way so they could obtain what they were meant to obtain. And so, I've been doing it my whole life, from being a teacher into coaching at the high school level, the college, junior college level, the college, and then the NFL. But that's what I'd really been doing my whole life. And when I finally figured that out, that was my reason, that was my path, then after I'd won all my championships, I was limited to, the 150 people that were in the room when I was with a team. And I wasn't able to get out and speak like I am now. Now I could travel the country speaking to thousands of people a year. And so coaching was a vehicle that got me to do what I was supposed to do, and that was to help people along their path.
Talk to me how you chose kind of the path of strength and conditioning. We think of a lot of coaches around, around football, right? I always think, like, my quarterback coach was one of the most impactful guys in my life. And you think, typically we talk that, but the strength and conditioning, obviously, like you said, you guys run the off season and the end season, and you've got a huge impact. What made you go that path versus, say, a position or wanting to pursue, because I know you had some work in head coaching and things at other levels, running down that path versus where you went with strength and conditioning?
Yeah, I proved to myself I was a terrible football coach. My record after 11 years of being a football coach was 33 wins, 77 losses, and 1 tie. So if you hired me in my first 11 years, I could assure you of 3 wins a season. Yeah, and that really struck me, like, maybe I'm not fit for this. Maybe this is not what I meant to. And so what I did was took the most important part of coaching. What has the greatest impact? And it was strength conditioning. My high school coach was a guy named Barry Alvarez, who went on to Iowa and Notre Dame and the head coach at Wisconsin. And he brought with him the Nebraska power system into our weight room at Mason City High School. And we won a state championship under Barry. And so I was always part of strength conditioning. It was always part of my life. But I found strength conditioning was a way that I could control my part of affecting the outcome of the team. Because if you don't control the development of the athlete, I don't care how good of a motivator you are or how good of an X and O person you are. If the athletes aren't there to win games, you're not going to win games. And so I took that aspect of being a strength conditioning coach because I wanted to control that part of it. And I touched every athlete every single day, and I helped them move along their path.
So, okay, so now I want to bounce around a little bit because you said something earlier I want to go back to about sitting on that plane, outlining next year's offseason while, I mean, let's be honest, the confetti's still probably on the ground from the night before.
Still in the air.
Still in the air, right? I find that really and here's why I find that interesting. One, that's a very common situation I think a lot of high performers find themselves in, right? We get to a mountaintop. It doesn't fulfill us the way we think. We're already focused on the next one. We can't be in that moment. What I found most interesting about what you said there is the people that you surround yourself with on that staff. Because when I think about Pete Carroll, he is somebody that from the outside, exhibits joy. The joy of being in the moment.
He's that guy every single day. There's not an on and off switch for him. He is stuck on. So many people think it's an act. This is Pete Carroll from Monday through Sunday, through good times and bads. There would be times we would walk out of the meeting room on Mondays after a loss on a Sunday, and I had to go look at the score because I really thought we might have won that game. You know, that if we looked at the score, maybe they were wrong. Maybe they added it wrong or something, because he would bring you to a point where he would lift you to that next game. And I know there are coaches, and like, you know, they talk about how hard Bill Belichick is in a film situation. But if we look at Bill and we look at Pete, they're on either end of the spectrum of coaching, but they have a commonality in that they're both championship coaches. Here's what they understand. They understand who they are. And that's the most important thing you can do, is understand who you are. Understand your strengths, and that's easy. That's your ego talking to you about all the great stuff you're good in. But you've got to dig down to find your weaknesses. Then you surround yourself with people who fill those weaknesses. It goes back to an Al Capone quote. Al Capone was asked, how do you find the people you trust? He said, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies. Now think, they're both $1. Yep. Which one do you want to carry with you? 4 quarters or 100 pennies. Remember, the information from that 1 quarter is 25 times better than that 1 penny that you're going to have. You don't have to carry all their baggage. So Pete and Bill are great at surrounding themselves with people that help them fill the gaps that they're not great at. And my part was strength conditioning. Got it. But what I did for Pete that was more important was I was a messenger for him. I would bring his message throughout the system because I touch the athletes every day. If we think of a college situation, in a college situation, college coaches are only with the players. They're not in the winter because they're out recruiting. And NCAA rules at the time we were there, they could not be with the athletes in June and July. So for 16 weeks, 8 in the winter and 8 in the summer, I was the person who had contact with the athletes, and so I spoke fluent Pete Carroll. Now, I didn't use his stories. I used the rules and the ideas of his stories and implemented my own stories in there so that when Pete told his stories, they were fresh. If I just regurgitated Pete Carroll's stories when he came in the fall, it would have been noise. It would have been that white noise to the players because they've heard him and heard him and heard him. But they heard my
Where did you pick that up? Who taught you that originally to do that?
No, that's just the way you do things.
Just you?
Yeah. I was coaching.
But I was about to say, but it's not for everybody.
I saw the worst and I saw the best, and I learned from both of them. See, people think we have to go to gurus to find out how to do things. No, we have the terrible people. Watch them. Because then you learn how not to do it. All right? I had 2 older brothers and 2 younger brother, younger sister. But I had 2 older brothers who made a lot of mistakes. And I sat there quietly and wrote in my own mind, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And so when my parents, I bring a girl home, the girl would say, hey, tell us stories about Chris. I go, we really don't have any. Yeah, because I learned from my older brothers how not to screw up. So I was able to sneak through the system. But you've got to be that messenger. If you're not the boss, then be the best messenger for the boss. Because that's where a culture's built. If you look at organizations fall apart, it's because a person on top is not being related all the way through from the top to the bottom. That means you've got to have leaders all the way down the line that are passing the information on to each level. They've got to preach whatever it is. Now, if they don't agree with you, you got to get rid of them. I don't care how much of a friend they are of yours. They're not helping you.
Talk to me.
Right.
Talk to me how, in your experience, Pete did that, because y'all were together for a while. I mean, USC, Seattle.
18
how
years.
did he?
Yeah.
How did he do that? Right from the top all the way down to not only empower you as a strength coach, but the other coaches in the program to be his messengers without having to tell his stories.
You're gonna have to ask him that.
From your experience, what do you remember?
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing that Pete did every year. And I have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks that are full. And so I took notes on everything. And every year he started with the same way. Here's my philosophy: always compete. Here's our style: great effort, great enthusiasm, great toughness, play smart. Here's my 3 rules: always protect the team, be early, no whining, complaining, no excuses. Okay, so every year he would hammer it home, not only to the players but to the coaches also. And if a coach would come up and go, "Hey, let's be on time," he would snap them right there. No, we're early. Early is about respect. When you come in early, it's about respecting the organization, about respecting the people you're working with, and most of all, about respecting yourself. Because you have enough respect for yourself that you got up early. You took care of all the stuff that could go wrong so you could get there, so you were ready to do what you're supposed to do. And so when you have that and you have a great leader like Pete Carroll, you get to learn that every day because he was present all the time.
How did you empower your assistant strength coaches to have this subculture within this overall? Because really, right, the strength room and strength training has its own culture that fits within the overall program that you're leading. And so how did you do it with your coaches?
Well, Pete told me what he needed. Here's what I need of my athletes. They got to prepare at the highest level, practice at the highest level so we can play at the highest level. I dealt with the preparation. I had to have the athletes trained. And so what I did was teach my coaches how to go ahead and live in the always compete, win forever attitude that Pete had. And it was easy, so we passed it down. I had only 2 rules. Mine were be early and communicate. Okay, always protect the team. That was great when you're talking about don't ball across the middle in practice. Don't cut your own teammate in half. You don't have to do that. You can run through them. And we had guys like Troy Polamalu who would come screaming through, and against a guy like Mike Williams, who was first round draft choice of the Lions, he would scream past him, and he would actually yell as he ran past him to let him know, I just cut you in half. But he didn't have to hit him. Or he didn't have to do that. All right. And so that was, and also protect your team was in the media. You don't have to cut anybody down. You got a problem, talk about in the locker room, okay? But you don't have to, you can protect your teammate. Now, mine were be early. We talked about the 3 reasons for respect there. And also communicate. I only had 2 rules because that's all you needed. And so everybody understood if we have a problem, we need to communicate. And Coach C communicates with all of us all the time, and we communicate back. So we also worked with my coaches. We taught them the fundamentals of how to do things right every day. And so that's how we trickled down, through my own little cast of my culture that we did, which just was an offshoot of Pete's. So
I love that. One of the stories that I really appreciated in your book had to do with your golf game. And going to conferences. And we laugh, and I bring this up because it's very common once you start to have success or you reach a certain job title to believe you know a lot.
Yeah.
And we start to check out. But you went through both sides of that, right? You experienced I know stuff. And then one day you went to a conference and you happened to notice some guys on the front row that may have had a pretty dramatic impact on your approach to your career going forward. Talk to us a little bit about that. I don't know, awareness or light bulb changing.
Those are hard lessons. That's hard. And they're the 3 bullets that kill every career that gets killed: arrogance, ignorance, and inflexibility. All right. And I just didn't know some stuff. I knew everything. See, when I left college, when I graduated, I didn't even apply for an assistant's job. That was my arrogance right there. Why would I want to sit behind a person that I've got to know more than? I know more than. All right. So I got a head job. I sold myself so well, that confidence I had. And so when I was driving the bus home and we were 1 and 3, epiphany hit me. I don't know anything about this profession. So I went back into it. So jump forward a couple more years in Little Rock at a convention, and Barry Switzer's there. And Barry Switzer tells an off-color joke that would get, he'd be fired because he told it. But in the 80s, it was funny and everybody laughed. And then he said, hey, I've got a meeting I've got to go to. My offensive coordinator's here. You want to hear him, and he knows all the stuff. So I've got to go. Barry leaves, and his coordinator stands up. He goes, hey, if you guys don't want to be here, I know you came to listen to the boss. Half the crowd got up and left. All right? How disrespectful. I was part of that group. All right? And I was irritated because I didn't bring my clubs. So the next year, I brought my golf clubs. Now, that greens fee you have to pay is because of me. Because how bad I don't make divots, I tear up pelts. All right? They're big beaver pelts of grass that I tear up. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go Bo Schembechler. And I was at that time a big Michigan fan, and I grew up watching Bo. And I thought, I'm going to go listen to Bo, throw in 10 minutes because my tea time's not till later. And I'm standing there in the back. That way I could leave real quick. And I noticed that there was Eddie Robinson, there was Tom Osborne, and there was Tom Landry were sitting up in the front with notepads in the front row to listen to Bo Schembechler. And it dawned on me, gee, these are the smartest coaches. This is who I emulate. This is who I want to be one day. And I'm going to walk out the back door. Well, I missed my tea time, and I sat, and from that day on, every time you go to a clinic and I'm there, I'm up on the left side, so I can hear each person. I take copious notes of every person I listen to because I've got this quest, and it started a long time ago. I want to learn everything. I'm not there yet, but I'm closer today than I was yesterday. So I'm continuing to grow my knowledge, but it's one of those things that you've got to be shown this kind of stuff. So my ignorance ended there. My arrogance after being a 1 and 3, and my inflexibility was this little scar right down here. I was a yeller, and that's the way from Bo Schembechler, Bobby Knight, Woody Hayes. They were all yellers, and they were all champions. Vince Lombardi, and I could yell, and when you stub your toe with those words, I developed them. I invented those words, and so I thought, if I yell really loud and yell louder, I'm going to win more championships. Like I said earlier, my record was 33-77-1 with that. And then, and I don't want to get up on a pulpit, but the power force of the nature stepped in and took a chicken house fan and crushed my skull. And this is all titanium. This whole area has been rebuilt. All right. And he said, you're not going to be able to go on the way you were, because I believe that God keeps nudging you back into place. But I was hard-headed, and it took a chicken house fan, which is, blades are stainless steel and 2 feet long. And so the doctor was going through his checklist of things I couldn't do. So I had just gotten a new head job at a high school at that time. And he said, okay, you can't lift weights because it causes intracranial pressure. You're going to cause a blood clot, and you're going to die. Okay, no lifting for a while. No contact. You can't hold a sneeze in. Got it. And you can't yell. Hold on. I checked my toolbox, and my sledgehammer was gone. And so I go out for my first practice in this new high school, and I've always yelled. And I couldn't speak any louder than this. And for the first time in my career, what happened was the players leaned in. See, they wanted to hear. They wanted to be coached. And I thought it was respect they were giving me when they reeled back when I yelled at them. that I was so forceful in my coaching, and I was so wrong for 11 years. After that, I went on to win 285 games, 16 championships, 6 championships as far as high school national championships and Super Bowls. And so it's one of those things that it was a career changer for me, that I had to get my inflexibility and change that so I could actually be who I was supposed to be. So that's that kind of the first chapter, ignorance, arrogance, and inflexibility.
Very much.
And my golf
Talk
game.
to me.
So I was so bad with my golf game. Billy Ryan, we were out with him. Billy Ryan was a wide receiver coach, and I was hitting the ball. I was frustrated, and he said, "I'm going to tell you what to do." He said, "Go ahead, put your clubs up for a week." And I thought, okay, here come, get away from it a little bit. He said, "And then sell them." so I golf a lot less these days, but I feel bad. So thanks for asking.
I've been told you can be a really good business owner or a really good golfer, but it's pretty impossible to be both. And similarly, it's you pick a path, and if I get out there and play, I'm going to play and enjoy it, but I'm definitely not going pro. Yeah, you mentioned something there about the success, and success is something very hard to sustain for a number of reasons. One, in sports, everybody's wants your number. Like, their biggest game of the year is you. But internally, we all experience. You get to a new level, you have success. What happens? That arrogance slips in. That ego starts to inflate. As someone who is around sustained excellence year after year, how do you maintain that edge while, I would say it's the line, right? How do you maintain the confidence that we can do this while also not letting that confidence drip into arrogance that we can get away with below excellent standards, execution, things like that?
You've got to remember who you are, and you have to have people around who are willing to tell you the truth. And that's what most people don't want to hear. And that's part of that culture thing. That's part of the Al Capone, the quarters thing, is you've got to have people around you who will tell you the truth that you don't want to hear, but that you need to hear. That's what you've got to have. And that's what we started every year. We would win that championship. We had just beat Oklahoma in the national championship game. And
don't say that too loud. If my wife happens to hear you, she's going to be very upset at the scars, the PTSD she still has from that.
Yeah, it was a close game. I think it was like 45. Anyway. So Matt Leinart had won the Heisman Trophy that year. And so we're out, 6 a.m. workouts where we start, it's like once you win the national championship, you're right back into it. You can't let everything go. So yeah, at that time we played on January 1st, or could it be 2nd or something at that time. But we were back like the 10th, 11th of January, back working out, 6 a.m. I had all my offensive linemen and quarterbacks had to be there at the same time. And we'd have a group of about 60 because people love to work out at 6 a.m. So they had the whole day. And so Matt Leinart comes through the door, and I have 2 rules, remember, be early and communicate. Well, he didn't communicate, and he was late. And the punishment for that was 50 up downs. So Matt comes jogging in through the gate. We're on the practice field. He comes jogging in, and I'm watching him. I'm a professional watcher. I watch how people respond in hard situations. And here are 60 athletes watching Matt Leinart, the guy who just won a national championship, the guy who had just won the Heisman Trophy. And he comes running up, and he stops, and no excuse, he starts doing his 50 up downs. Nobody had to say anything to him. He just started doing 50 up downs. Now, right there was a leader, because he just told the third string punter that if he's late and can be punished, every one of them can be punished for the same thing. All right. And so that's how you continue winning championships, is you have the strong culture and your leaders don't think they're above the culture. And that's where success comes from. That's how you sustain success, is having that tight line. Never allow that culture to become unraveled, because that's where you start having problems, when you start relaxing and thinking you've got it made. The day you stop working is the day everybody just took a step ahead of you. Because it's like the Olympics 100 meter. You're going to win by hundreds and thousands of a second. And if you stopped to look around, you would have got beat. And so when you're in competition with somebody, it may seem you have gapped them, but they're one step away from gapping you. And so you've got to continue to work at the same level you did. I mean, that's the thing that we never let down. We never slowed down the way we prepared. We never took shortcuts. We had our recipe of how to build championships, and that's what we stayed on, and we stayed with that same system throughout 18 years of coaching.
So one of the things as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you that I think ties into some of that is the idea of competition, right? Pete's always compete. That was through and through your culture. And competition brings out the best within us. However, there is also a light to understanding it's you versus you every day. Like, you're competing with teammates for a starting job, but you only control how well you show up, how hard you work, things like that. When you've built such a healthy, competitive culture, how did you as the strength coach make sure guys understood their identity or their self-worth was tied up in how they competed, not necessarily the outcome? Because you had guys that would probably compete their heart out that were never going to take a job from a Reggie Bush or a Matt Leinart. But they were all in on that culture. So how did you make sure that those guys didn't see themselves as lesser than people?
Yeah.
Through that, because I think we struggle with that, right? If we live in a constant me versus you, we can get our self-worth, and I went through that as an athlete, tied up in am I better than you? And if I'm not better than you, how much of a loser am I? Versus how am I competing with myself?
We had a kid named Clay Matthews, had a bit of an NFL career. You know, as a senior in high school, his dad was his football coach, and he didn't start on that high school team. And he was a walk-on at USC. All right? And so Clay did not allow that to stop him. He was around Ray Maaluga. He was around Brian Cushing. He was around so many great Keith Rivers. These are all draft choices that went in and played several years in the NFL. And he's competing with these guys. So he went out and did what he had to do, worked hard, made himself better. But when it came to special teams where he could get on the field, he ripped down the field and he would do everything they asked him to do. And so all of a sudden, he made travel squads. And if you're on the travel squad, you're on a limited group, only 53 traveled. And so you had to be able to play on the field. And so we were playing Oregon State, and Emerson Griffin couldn't stop Jaquiz Rogers because he wouldn't close the hole down on the stretch play. And so they took Everson out and brought Clay in. He shut him down. And so Clay never left the field. They just moved Everson to the other side. And so he earned his spot. And so I don't care what gifts you have or what I was born with handicaps, physical handicaps in both feet. And the doctor told my parents, he'll never run like the rest of the kids. And they were right. I ran better. I earned a scholarship in football. I fell down, the old Japanese adage, fall down 7, stand up 8, or fall down 6, stand up 7. All right? And I knocked my front teeth out when I was trying to learn to walk with my handicap. And in 5th grade, I remember sitting outside the speech therapist's door during a parent-teachers meeting. And I heard the therapist tell my mom, well, he'll never be a public speaker. And in both those cases, my mom said to the doctors and to the therapist, 4 words, we'll see about that. We'll see about that. Now, I came from Little Shadron State College. I was a high school football coach. I was a junior college coach, and I was a college, and I won a Super Bowl. Coming from Shadron State, from Mason City, Iowa. I had no silver spoon. So what I'm going to say is, I don't care how far back you think you are. The only thing that's holding you back is you. You can become whoever you want to become. It's such a great world out there, especially the way the young people are pulling themselves out in minimal Mondays and quiet Thursdays and short weeks. Good. Keep taking a step back. Because when I was coaching, it was you better be on every single day. Like I said, if you take a break, people are going to pass you. And so I don't care where you start. That's not set in wood. Nobody stops you but you. And it's easy to sit there and blame other people. That's the easiest thing you can do. And that's what society has allowed us to do right now, is to blame others for their shortcomings. It's their fault. It's their fault. It's your fault. The person in the mirror is the person who is directly responsible for your success or your failure.
I agree.
I don't know how much of that you heard because you froze up on me.
I was about to say I lost you on a few parts, but I got the chunk of it on the. I mean, it's up to you, right? If it's meant to be, it's up to me. And regardless of the starting position, to your point, the bar of excellence has been lowered.
Yeah, hey, look in the mirror. That's who you blame every day. Now, don't always put the negative connotation in there. Also give them credit for everything you do. 80% of the messages we get every day are negative. And if we buy into those, we become less. So go ahead and inundate those messages with positive self-messaging and tell yourself that you are worthy. I've never had the problem. I've always believed in myself. We'll see about that. Go ahead and put me behind because I'm going to find out how to get there. From a high school coach to a Super Bowl. All right? I did it. I don't care what business you're in, you can do it in your own world. How bad do you want it? How many excuses are you going to make for why you don't get there? That's the thing that's going to kill you.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Coach, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you taking some time to join the show. We've got links to not only your website, thecoachcarlisle.com, where it's got information on hiring you to come speak, the group coaching you do, as well as your elite individual performance coaching, but copies and places they can pick up their copy of Move or Die, which is your book we've talked about a few times. Learn how to create a game plan to go from stuck to significance. Coach, man, this has been a lot of fun. Last thing I've got for you as we start to wrap up today, for all of our listeners who want to follow you on social media, get more of this energy and truth you spit, where's the best place for us to connect with you?
TheCoachCarlisle.com. I think that's Instagram. Coach Carlisle. Coach Chris Carlisle, I think, is on Facebook. So just pull up my website. It's info at www.thecoachcarlisle.com. And all my links are there. All my blogs.
Love it. Love it. We've got all of that linked to the show notes. All you got to do, listeners, click the button here on the show description. You'll get more details. And thanks for being here. Coach, this has been so much fun. Thanks for making the time today.